Welcome to this edition of the Native News Update. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories viewed here can be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. Here are the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native American news sources. A federal appeals court April 14th upheld the life sentences of two Billings men convicted of kidnapping and raping two women in 2005. A three-judge panel of the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals upheld the sentences imposed on 24-year-old Patrick Doyle and 23-year-old Daniel Bigman. Each pled guilty in October of 2005 to 2 counts of kidnapping and 4 counts of aggravated sexual assault. Prosecutors say Doyle and Bigman in January of 2005 asked two Billings women for a ride and then forced them into the trunk of the car at knife point, took them to both the Crow and Cheyenne reservations, and forced them to engage in sexual acts. The U.S. Attorney for South Dakota and a defense lawyer argue in an appeal in the 1975 slaying of a Canadian woman, April 15th, less than 1 month before the case goes to trial. John Graham is one of 2 men indicted on charges they killed or aided the murder of fellow American Indian Movement member Anna Mae Aquash. Days before Graham was to stand trial in October of last year, a federal judge threw out the indictment because grand jurors didn't consider whether Graham or Aquash belonged to a federally recognized tribe or were considered Indians under U.S. law. Both belonged to Canadian tribes. The 8th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in St. Louis granted the prosecutor's request for a hearing on his appeal of that ruling. Graham and a co-defendant, Richard Marshall, will stand trial starting May 12th in Rapid City, South Dakota. The body of a missing Wolf Point, Montana high school student was found near Poplar. Jose Figueroa, Public Safety Director for the Fort Peck Tribe, says 17-year-old Desmond Clark was found the afternoon of April 14th. No information has been released about how Clark passed away. He had been missing since last Friday. A search began April 11th and focused on an area 5 miles southeast of Poplar that is filled with brush, trees, and alfalfa fields. Family members say Clark attended an outdoor party with other teenagers near the Missouri River on Friday night and left after fighting with another male. A leader in Washington's Native American community will be remembered this weekend with a memorial at the Daybreak Star Cultural Center in Seattle. Rochelle Rasmussen Sandine of Billingham passed away April 9th of liver cancer. The 57-year-old woman was president of Honor Day, an annual ceremony that brings Native Americans together to celebrate their culture. Rasmussen Sandine was a few courses away from receiving her bachelor's degree in communications from Western Washington's University. She took classes while working in the university's administrative offices. The memorial service will be held this Saturday. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. has ruled that Butte County, California, cannot stop a tribal casino from being built. U.S. District Judge Henry Kennedy rejected the county's argument this week, claiming that the Chico Ranchera Mech Opta is a collection of 11 unrelated groups that have little in common with the historic Mech Opta tribe. Butte County Counsel Bruce Albert says a casino along Highway 149 will cause problems for public safety, traffic, and the environment. He says the county will consider appealing. Tribal spokesman Doug Elmetz said the tribe will seek state agreements that will allow for gambling on the 645-acre site near Oroville, California, about 70 miles north of the state capital. Wisconsin wildlife officials have set up new daily walleye bag limits for anglers as Chippewa Treaty spearfishing begins in the region. The Department of Natural Resources has revised limits on 418 lakes in the Wisconsin ceded territory. The rules include a 3 walleye limit on 87 lakes, a 2 walleye limit on 324 lakes, and 1 walleye on 7 lakes. The 6 Wisconsin Chippewa bands have set their annual fishing harvest quotas, and the DNR then adjusts bag limits for the lakes the Ojibwe have declared for their harvest. The idea is to make sure that the combined tribal and recreational take doesn't jeopardize the walleye population of any particular lake. A Native American Somerset High School senior in Texas, whose parents filed a federal lawsuit saying his right of religious expression was violated when he received a suspension, can return to class without having to cut his shoulder-length hair. Jesus Figueroa's long hair has been an issue since last school year, landing him in on-campus suspension several times. After a battle that included a federal lawsuit, the Somerset Independent School District Board of Trustees voted unanimously recently to grant the 17-year-old an exemption from the district's grooming policy. The policy bans male hair from touching the collar. Figueroa believes his hair is a gift from the Great Spirit and should only be cut to mourn the death of a loved one. In Iowa, a tribal volunteer firefighter who was seriously burned while fighting wildfires last week near Wellston, Oklahoma, remains in critical condition, but family members say he's continuing to improve. David Milby, the tribe's fire training officer, was burned over 26% of his body April 9th when he and his partner, Jeff Bay-Hilly, became stuck in a field and couldn't flee the flames that blew over them and their rig. Milby's wife of 20 years, Bonnie, said she spends as much time at Integris Health Burn Center in Oklahoma City as the hospital staff will let her, standing at her husband's bedside, rubbing the top of his head, a spot the flames didn't touch. She talks to him and prays. She waits for the swelling of her husband's burned face to go down. Milby, who remains on a ventilator, suffered 2nd and 3rd degree burns on his face, arms, and back. He's expected to be in the burn center at least another month. We had one powwow yesterday, if you're interested on the powwow circuit, that we didn't read, so we want to get that. That's coming up on April 18th and 19th. It's called the Golden Hill Pagaset Powwow, and that's at the East Rock State Park in New Haven, Connecticut. So if you're out this weekend, enjoy that one as well. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank our underwriters for helping with this broadcast and you for joining with us again. Miigwech.